All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into Bitcoin. And no, not just as a piece of tech or a weird internet thing. We're going to look at it as an idea, something with some pretty heavy philosophical roots, and, as it turns out, a brand new playbook for business.
But look, before we can even wrap our heads around a new kind of money, we have to take a step back and ask a really basic question. It sounds almost too simple, but what is money, really? The sources we're digging into today argue that most of us don't have the full picture, and getting this right, well, that's the key that unlocks this whole thing.
So let's start with a basic toolkit. For centuries, thinkers have agreed that for something to be considered good money, it needs to have 6 main qualities. It's got to be durable, so it doesn't fall apart in your pocket. It has to be portable, easy to carry around. You need to be able to divide it into smaller pieces. It needs to be fungible, which just means $1 is the same as any other dollar. Crucially, it has to be scarce, so you can't just make more of it out of thin air. And finally, people have to actually agree to accept it as valuable. Keep these 6 in your back pocket.
Now, here's a really cool kind of philosophical idea from one of our sources. It says to think about money and a coin, like a soul and a body. Money is the soul. It's the abstract idea of value. The coin, or the paper bill, that's just the body. It's the physical container. And here's the kicker. If the soul, the value, leaves that body, let's say because of hyperinflation, that coin just becomes a hunk of metal. It loses its moneyness.
And that leads us to this huge distinction between hard money and soft money. For pretty much all of human history, people naturally chose hard money, something like gold. Why? Because you can't just wish more of it into existence. It takes real energy and effort to dig it out of the ground. Its supply is hard to increase. Soft money, on the other hand, is what most of us use today. It's money by decree. A government just says it's money, and a central bank can create trillions more with, literally, a few keystrokes. Its supply is easy to increase.
And, this isn't some new radical idea. It's a problem that's been around forever. Adam Smith, way back in the 1700s, pointed out that governments have always had a habit of, cheating. He said they've always gradually reduced the amount of actual gold or silver in their coins to their own benefit. So, governments messing with the money supply, it's a tale as old as time.
The system we all live in today is called a fiat system. Fiat is just Latin for by decree or let it be done. So our money has value because the government says it does, period. Its value isn't tied to any of those properties we talked about, like scarcity. It's based entirely on our trust in that government.
So, what's the result of shifting from hard money to the soft, trust-based money? Well, according to one of our key sources, the business case for Bitcoin, the US dollar has lost over 96% of its purchasing power over the last 100 years. Let that sink in. That's not a bug in the system. It's a feature of a system where the supply of money can be expanded infinitely.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem, as our sources see it. The economist Friedrich Hayek put it pretty bluntly. He said history is basically just a story of inflation, and that inflation is usually created by governments to benefit, governments. The core argument is that the system is set up to help the issuer, not the person trying to save.
Okay, so with this massive problem on the table, where did the idea for a solution even come from? We have to go back to the 1990s and meet a group called the cypherpunks. These were cryptographers, programmers, and privacy advocates who saw what was coming with the internet. They weren't just tinkering, they were on a mission. They wanted to use encryption to build a new form of digital cash, one that could be free from government control and debasement.
All of that work finally led to this. In 2008, the Bitcoin White Paper, published by the anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto. And this line, right from the abstract, is the entire mission statement. It's not about blockchains or tokens. It's about building a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash that lets you send money directly to someone else without going through a financial institution. The goal was to fire the middleman.
So how in the world does that work without a bank or a Visa to approve everything? Well, it's run by a global network of computers. When you make a transaction, it gets broadcast to everyone. These computers, or nodes, bundle all the new transactions into a block. Then they all start racing to solve a really hard math problem. This race is called proof of work. Whoever wins the race gets to add their block to the chain and gets rewarded. This constant competition is what keeps the whole network secure and honest, and it lets everyone agree on what happened without needing a single person in charge.
And this clever system gives us 3 breakthroughs, each one solving a problem we talked about earlier. First, you get true digital scarcity. The code says there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. It can't be inflated away. That tackles the soft money problem. Second, you get decentralization. No one person, company, or government owns or controls it. That tackles the problem of having to trust a single authority. And third, proof of work. By tying the security of the network to real-world energy, it becomes tamper-proof. It solves the problem of trusting a digital ledger.
Now, here's a really important point that our sources hammer home, and it's where a lot of people get tripped up. Bitcoin is not the same thing as crypto. They argue that Bitcoin is unique. It's a monetary protocol, kind of like the base layer of the internet, but for money. It's designed to be slow, steady, and secure. A lot of other cryptocurrencies, on the other hand, are more like tech startups. They're often centralized, focused on speed or fancy features, and in many cases, they bring back the exact same problems of trust that Bitcoin was created to solve.
So, what does this mean for the business world? Well, let's look at how a company might view Bitcoin as an asset to hold in its treasury. Compared to something like gold, which has a slowly increasing supply, Bitcoin's scarcity is absolute. It's fixed. Compared to stocks or real estate, there's no counterparty risk. You don't have to trust a CEO or a government to not mess things up. You hold the asset directly. This unique combination, proponents say, makes it an entirely new type of treasury reserve asset.
And this has led to some pretty wild new corporate strategies. Take this one, called the flywheel. A company goes out and raises capital by issuing cheap debt. Then, it uses that cash to buy Bitcoin and puts it on its balance sheet. If Bitcoin's value goes up, the company's own valuation increases. And with that higher valuation, it can then go out and raise even more capital, buy more Bitcoin, and just keep that cycle going. It basically turns a company's treasury from a boring cost center into a potential growth engine.
And it's not just about hoarding it on a balance sheet. Businesses are getting really creative. Sure, using it as a treasury reserve is the biggest use case right now. The companies are also using it to slash fees on international payments, to make money from otherwise wasted energy, to offer unique rewards programs, and even as a way to attract young, forward-thinking talent who want to work for a company that gets it. So in the end, the argument from these sources isn't just that Bitcoin is a new asset. It's that it's a profound challenge to the old way of doing things. One source uses this incredible analogy from Isaac Asimov. It says, a rotten tree looks perfectly solid right up until the moment a storm snaps it in half. Listen with the ears of Bitcoin, it says, and you will hear the creaking. The point is, Bitcoin isn't causing the problems, it's just making us aware of the cracks that were already there. Which really leaves us all with a fundamental choice. Bitcoin puts a question on the table that we can't ignore anymore. In this digital age, what should our money actually be? What qualities matter most? And maybe the biggest question of all, who gets to decide? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.